Greetings, YouTube. Anyways, this is the introduction to the Sunnah part 2, and I'm just waiting for the slide to start. I don't know what's going on with my computer. Okay, finally. I really hate technology sometimes. Anyways, so yeah, this is introduction to the Sunnah part 2. So before I move on to part 2 and start discussing the Sirah, do want to go over I do want to go over one or more things that I was going over in the first video. A a hadith has more than one parts to it, and the isnad is one part of a hadith, and a and there's another part of a hadith which is called matan, which is the actual text of the report of the hadith. In other words, it's the textual part of the hadith. And the isnad is the chain of reporters part of the hadith. So therefore, you have more than one components of a hadith. The isnad being one, and the matan or textual component of the hadith being another component of the hadith. So, and the quality of the isnad or chain of narrators or chain of reporters determines whether a hadith is either Sahih, Hasan, Daif, or Mawdu. Now, just to go over Daif one more time at least, all the Daif hadiths are hadiths that fail to reach the status of Hasan, but at the same time, they're not Mawdu. Mawdu are in a more inferior position when it comes to levels of authenticity uh, in front of the Daif hadiths. So, Maudu are inferior to Daif when it comes to levels of hadith authenticity. Maudu hadiths are to be completely discarded and are not to be used as sources of Islamic faith, belief, practices, or anything pertaining to Islam at all. They're to be completely discarded. The Christian equivalent of the Maudu hadiths would be the New Testament Apocrypha. For example, like the Infancy Gospel of Thomas is an example of New Testament Apocrypha, which does not belong to the New Testament canon. And so, therefore, it is not part of the New Testament canon, and therefore is not seen as a authoritative or authentic source for Jesus's life and teachings. And if I am incorrect about that, please do correct me in the comment section. So, so yeah, so that's that, and I'm going to move on to the Sirah. No, actually, I'm not going to move on to the Sirah. I'm actually going to, first of all, before going on to the Sirah, I'm actually going to show you guys an example of a Hadith with its Isnad component and its Matan component. Now, this Hadith is taken from Sahih Bukhari, and from my previous video, you guys know what Sahih Bukhari is. It's one of the top prominent, most authoritative six collections of hadiths uh, among Sunni Muslims. So, as I mentioned in my last video, Sunnis have multiple collections of hadiths, but the most prominent six have Sahih Bukhari as the most authentic of the authentic six collections of hadiths. Well, I mean, most Sunni Muslims at least consider Sahih Bukhari to be the most authentic of the six most authentic collections of hadiths from all Sunni collections. So the green part of this hadith is the isnad component of the hadith, and the part in red is the matan component of the hadith. And so I'm going to read the green part first, and I quote, Al-Bukhari reported that Yahya ibn Bukhair narrated to us from Al-Layth, from Uqayl, from Ibn Shuba, from Urwa, from Aisha, who said, unquote, so far what I read to you is the isnad of this hadith. Now here comes the matan, and I quote, whenever the Prophet was given an option between two things, he used to select the easier of the two, as long as it was not sinful, but if it was sinful, he would remain far from it, unquote. Now, I just want to give you guys a side note that if you look at the English translation of this hadith, apparently, I don't know why the English translator or English translators have not entirely translated the isnad into the English. So, but if you read the original Arabic, the entire isnad is mentioned there. But in the English translation of this hadith, it starts off by saying, and I quote, narrated Aisha, unquote, and then goes from there, blah, blah, blah. It omits all the names mentioned before Aisha's name. And so I don't know why the English translator or who translators did this, but yeah, it's just a side note I wanted to share with you guys. But anyways, I hope you understand what a matan component of a hadith is and what is the isnad component of a hadith by showing you this example on this slide here. And if there's any questions you guys have so far, please feel free to ask in the comment section. If there's anything that I've told you guys so far in the first or second part of this video series, please let me know by posting a question or more in the comment section or by PMing me. Please don't hesitate to ask. So, anyways, moving on to the Sira, and you guys know what the Sira is. I did briefly go over what the Sira is in my last video. So, anyways, when using the Hadith or Sira literature, you have to be careful. So, point number one, according to traditional Islamic scholarship, there are materials in the Hadiths and Sira that can be reliable information. For example, Sahih Hadiths and Hasan Hadiths would come under the category of reliable information. Reliable information. Reliable information regarding what? Well, reliable information regarding the Prophet and his Sunnah, while the others are to be discarded. Now, Maudu materials are to be completely discarded and never to be used at all, period. But what Islamic scholars have done with Daif hadiths is that they don't, like when it comes to Islamic law, Daif hadiths are to be completely kicked out along with Maudu. But when it comes to matters other than Islamic law, for example, spiritual matters, there have been Islamic scholars who have sometimes used daif hadiths for issues pertaining to matters uh, outside of Islamic law. For example, spirituality being one example. And there's another example of the daif hadiths being used by Islamic scholars. But I can't remember right off the top of my head. But what I can definitely tell you guys is that when it comes to Islamic law, daif hadiths are not consulted and are not considered authoritative at all when it comes to yeah, Islamic law. And before we move on to the second point, I just want to again press this point one more time that Sahih or authentic and Hasan or good hadiths are the only types of hadiths that are to be used and are used when it comes to Islamic law. Now, moving on to the second point, in the anti-Islam sector of the world, two siras are extensively used to show the Prophet to be a violent man, and thereby, since Muslims are to follow their Prophet's Sunnah, these anti-Islam individuals assert that, well, Muslims are obligated to be violent too. Now, these two siras are number one is Sirat al Rasulullah, which is Arabic for Life of the Messenger of God, and the other is Tariq al-Tabari, which is Arabic for History of al-Tabari. Now, it does not only now Tariq al-Tabari does not only contain the Sirah of the Prophet, but also contains biographical materials. Uh, if I'm correct in my memory, of other individuals as well, besides the Prophet of Islam. So, among the essential things to know about Sirat al-Rasulullah are number one, it was written by a man named Ibn Ishaq, and if you go back in time, you would see how the reliability of Ibn Ishaq was questioned by Islamic scholars such as Imam Malik, who was a contemporary of Ibn Ishaq and the one who founded the Maliki school of thought of Sunni Islam. Other scholars such as Al-Nasail and Yahya bin Qatan did not view Ibn Ishaq as a reliable or authoritative source of hadith. So, in other words, if Ibn Ishaq was considered a reliable source of information regarding the Prophet, these scholars would not have a problem using him as a source of hadith. But I mean, again, we know that this was not the case. Imam Ahmed ibn Hanbal, who was the founder of the Hanbali school of thought of Sunni Islam, when he was asked regarding whether or not solitary reports of Ibn Ishaq are to be taken as reliable, the Imam responded by saying no. Famous critic of Islam and polemist Robert Spencer, in his book The Truth About Muhammad, founder of the most intolerant religion, despite extensively quoting from Ibn Ishaq's Sirat al-Rasulullah, says the following, and I quote, however, Ishaq's life of Muhammad is so unashamedly hagiographical that its accuracy is questionable, unquote. Wow, the irony. So, on one hand, you're saying that this man is, I mean, his accuracy is questionable, yet you're okay, okay, well, hold on a second. Let's just let's just see this thing here. So Ibn Ishaq's literature is questionable regarding its accuracy, yet at the same time you're using it as a source to show how bad of a person the Prophet of Islam was. I mean, you can't have it both ways. I mean, that's what I would like to tell Robert Spencer. I mean, that's what I would have told him. I mean, um, if I ever come across him using Ibn Ishaq extensively against the Prophet of Islam. So, in conclusion, when analyzed in the light of the history of Islamic scholarship, Ibn Ishaq's Sirat al-Rasulullah is a disputable source, to say the least. So basically, if you use Ibn Ishaq's Sirat al-Rasulullah as proof or evidence against the character of the Prophet of Islam, that is essentially no different from using a gospel outside of the New Testament canon as evidence or proof against the character of Jesus. Such an argument would not fly with a Christian, so neither would this fly with a Muslim, or at least it shouldn't. Because there's no reason, from the perspective of Islamic scholarship, for a Muslim to consider Ibn Ishaq's account of the Prophet to be 100% reliable. Now, going to Tariq al-Tabari, Tariq al-Tabari is a piece of literature that was authored by Imam al-Tabari, and Imam al-Tabari uh, is one of the famous scholars of Islam known in Islamic history. And here's what he has to say in the introduction of his own book, Tariq al-Tabari, and I quote, "Let him who examines this book of mine know that I have relied, as regards everything I have mentioned therein, which I stipulate to be described by me solely upon what has been transmitted to me by way of reports which I cite therein and traditions, which I ascribe to their narrators to the exclusion of what may be apprehended by rational argument or deduced by the human mind, except in very few cases. This is because knowledge of the reports of men of the past and of contemporaneous views of men of the present do not reach the one who has not witnessed them nor lived in their times, except through the accounts of reporters and the transmission of transmitters, to the exclusion of rational deduction and mental inference. Hence, if I mention in this book a report about some men of the past, which the reader or listener finds objectionable or worthy of censure, censor because he can see no aspect of truth nor any factual substance therein, let him know that this is not to be attributed to us, but to those who transmitted it to us, and we have merely passed this on as it has been passed on to us. Unquote. So as you can see, Imam al-Tabari, he's not he, showing any defensive attitude um, towards those who would consider any of his materials to be questionable or worthy of censure because they see no aspect of truth or any factual substance within them. He doesn't show a defensive attitude at all. If anything, his attitude is, well, in a nutshell, and I paraphrase, don't blame us. Just keep one thing in mind is that we're just reporting what was brought to us. So, if Imam al Tabari considered his own works to be completely reliable and flawless, then his, his the introduction of his book would not be the way it is. I mean, you would see a more confident attitude than the attitude you see of Imam al-Tabari and these words found in the introduction of his very own book, Tariq al-Tabari. So, anyways, I think that is sufficient information. I think I've given sufficient information so far regarding the topic, introduction to the Sunnah, and that's it for now. Anyways, have a good rest of the week, and ciao.